Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. When was the last time you just called a friend? No scheduling, no texting first to ask if they're free. You just picked up the phone because you wanted to talk and hit dial. Think about it for a second. Now, was it your closest friend? Maybe your sister, your brother, your mom? I'm not talking about those people. I'm just talking about a friend. You know, it's fascinating how we've all developed these unspoken rules about phone calls. Some people we can ring spontaneously, while others require multiple rounds of scheduling just to catch up for 15-20 minutes. And the really wild part that just blows my mind is that we're carrying these incredible supercomputers in our pockets all day long, but somehow we've made actually using them to stay in touch more complicated than ever. And if you're thinking, Alex, it's not more complicated, then let me remind you of an all too familiar feeling. You're scrolling through your phone, could be social media, or maybe you're looking for a contact, and you see someone's name. And as you're sitting there thinking like, man, I should call them. How long has it been? I don't know, like 1, 2, 3, 4 months? 4 months since I've talked to them? And this is someone you wish you talked to more. And then with that sinking feeling in your stomach, the voices in your head start to spin. If I were a good friend, maybe we aren't as close anymore. They're probably too busy. I'm too busy. Today's episode is about the gap between wanting to stay connected and actually doing it. Because here's the thing, we all want to be better at keeping in touch, but somehow life gets in the way. We forget, we overthink, we tell ourselves, we'll call tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes next week, becomes next month. My guest today is Mark Houghton, and he didn't just relate to this problem, he decided to solve it. Mark is a software developer who, like many of us, found himself struggling to maintain long-distance friendships as people moved across cities and countries. But instead of accepting this as just how things are, he created SoonCall, an app designed to help people stay connected through something we've somehow forgotten how to actually do: talking on the phone. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but Alex, I don't want more phone calls. I prefer texting, and that's totally valid. We all have different communication styles and preferences. But whether you're a spontaneous caller, a scheduled calls-only person, or someone who would rather just keep things in the text thread, this episode is something for you because this conversation isn't just about phone calls or an app. It's about the very real challenges we face to maintain modern friendships. We dive into how we've overcomplicated staying in touch and why having systems to support our connections isn't just okay. It might be exactly what we need. Get ready for an honest conversation about friendship maintenance in the digital age and maybe, just maybe, a solution that could help us all stay a little more connected. Let's dive in. Hi, Mark. I am so grateful that you reached out. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm excited to talk about SoonCall. Yeah, just thanks for saying yes, and welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast.
Thanks for inviting me on. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, I'm going to come out of the gate with, I'm sure, a super hard-hitting question. Not really. I'm sure you have to give this answer all the time. But can you tell us a little bit about SoonCall and I guess like why you created it?
SoonCall, as I'm sure you probably hear from many people that build things, it was created out of need, a personal need. That's how it started out. So I built a lot of strong friendships over the years that I spent in research. And then I noticed some of my closest friends drifting across different cities, different countries. And then more recently, I moved country myself as well. And I realized that some of the things that I think some people maybe find easy or take for granted, I realized that for myself, it wasn't that easy to manage my friendships, keep track of when I'd last reached out to people. I felt quite disconnected in some respects. So I started trying to explore what I could do about that, I guess. So I'm a software developer by training, I suppose you could say. So I naturally wanted to build something to try and help me with that. And the more I got into it and the more I spoke to other people, the more I realized that this could hopefully be something that helps other people as well, perhaps in a similar situation.
Well, as I mentioned to you before when we chatted, I have always thought that an app for something like this and some other things would be so useful to people, because I do think for a lot of people, friendships are kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I don't think that it's not even I think. I know, because I've talked to so many people about their friendships at this point, that you are not the only one. You just happen to have the skills, the tech skills that so many people don't have to create an app to help people with this. So thanks for doing something with your own problem, I guess, right? Deciding to make this solution.
I know, you're welcome. Yeah, it felt like a bit of an itch that I needed to scratch, really. And I mean, it's been really rewarding kind of talking to people through the process, trying to understand what it is that can help other people when it comes to kind of maintaining long distance friendships.
In that first iteration, which is not even a year old now, coming up on that 1 year birthday, what were some of the very first, I guess, features? What were the first things that you thought were the most important people? Because I've dug around in the app now, and there are just layers and layers and layers of ways you can use this app. So was it mainly the call tracking feature?
Yes, yeah, I would say so. I would say that the core that we built it around was trying to get people speaking more on the phone. So it was really birthed as a way to track when you've spoken to someone on the phone. And then over time, we've started, like you say, layering on kind of more things. Tracking dates, I think, has been something that came quite early, but we've been kind of working on improving as well. So being able to remember your friend's birthday is something that I think most of us have our own kind of tools for. A lot of people I speak to just rely on Facebook kind of notifications, for example.
Oh, wow.
Personally, I didn't want to rely on getting that notification because maybe it wasn't always going to notify me about the right friends and this kind of stuff. So even just a smaller thing like that, I think, was something that we put in fairly early on, and we've realized that people quite like that. So we started with that core, like you say, of tracking, helping people track when they last had a phone call with someone. And now we're realizing that maybe people also find this useful with messages as well, or in person, meeting the friends in person. So just this kind of ability to keep track of when they've reached out to people, and then maybe making notes around that, maybe kind of logging how they felt, key parts of their conversations, and then trying to build a bit of a picture for people based on their own data, give them some insights.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty stark reminder in a way that I don't personally have anywhere else. I am looking at the app right now in front of me. I've added some people to it. I've been using it now for a few weeks. And when you add your contacts, it says the name of the person. And then below it, for me, this one of these people, it says spoken 12 days ago. It is such a, like I said, a stark, I think is a good word, reminder of, I mean, I'm just sitting here being wait, how has it almost been 2 weeks since we talked? And I didn't even add everybody in there. So I feel if I added a broader list, I should probably go do that. it would be a pretty like, oh, wow moment. Like, for example, my sister and I go through, I feel like, spurts where we talk like multiple times a week, and then we'll go long stretches. And her and I have just had a lot going on since, honestly, the new year. And I texted her last night randomly about a photo that made me keel over laughing that like I now have to save and use as blackmail against her for the rest of the time. But if I put that in there, it would probably tell me that the last time I called her was over 3 months ago. But because I don't have anywhere that is written down, it's easy for me to just kick it down the line a little bit. Like normally I'm not thinking like, oh, it's been 3 months.
Yeah. And I think in some ways this was a tricky point when I started out on the development of this app, because I think it almost makes you a bit uncomfortable, right? To kind of have that level of visibility.
Yes.
It can be quite challenging to see, wow, it's actually been that long, and have that kind of reminder. And I think there's obviously a balance to be had there. Our goal is not to stress people out, right? But it's just to try and help people be more intentional.
Sorry, I want to be clear. I don't think you're stressing me out. I think what you've done is amazing. And I think that if anybody is stressed, like one, we should all give ourselves a little grace because we can't be calling everybody every day. But two, I think that the process of becoming more aware of your like connection habits is just like developing any other habit. Like when you said, right, this is a tension point, you don't want to make people uncomfortable. What it made me think of is something I talk about all the time, which is that developing your connection habits is similar to developing money habits. And for a lot of people, it is stressful to open your budgeting app because you have to have some reality and some accountability about the number of times that I like returned my library books late. I used to be really, really bad at that. I've gotten much better. Thank goodness for like ebook things that auto return. But anyways, I'd have to look at that. I'd have to look at the number of times I got a parking ticket. I also used to be really bad at that. It's been years, but I'm just trying to point out like these are things that I used to have anxiety about, and I'd have to open it up and be like, wow, I got 4 parking tickets this year just because I couldn't remember to like re-up my $1 fee. There are all sorts of areas in life where we are uncomfortable. And I think that it's just very normalized that in order to get better, you have to open the budgeting apps. So don't apologize for what you're doing. Like people have to get a little uncomfortable. We all say that our connections matter to us. If that means you have to look at this thing and realize that it's been 3 months since I've called my sister and not sent some message or responded somewhere, like I need to be uncomfortable to change my habit.
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point. I think these kinds of facing up to these truths and building the habits, it's obviously, it's not going to be for everyone, but I think that those that are looking to build themselves in that way, in this case with friendships, that's exactly what we're wanting to do is give them that information and say, look, okay, this is your current status across all of your friendships. And then also it's kind of down to you how to manage that, right? If you can see that you've not spoken to your sister for however many days, but then also your other friend you've caught up with more recently, I mean, aside from anything else, it just helps you understand, okay, well, I am actually already putting a lot of time and nurturing this one friendship, but I can see that I'm kind of letting one of my other friendships slip a little bit.
Yeah, I just think it's some like personal accountability. And the thing is, right, you don't have to show anybody else your SoonCall.
No, yeah, well, exactly.
Nobody else knows. But for yourself, it should be, I mean, hopefully some motivation if this is an important area of your life.
Yep.
That would be my hope. I love these little pop-ins I do right here so much for so many reasons. But one of the reasons is because sometimes I listen back to these episodes and I'm like, wow, I just got so into the conversation, but there's something I really should have said there. Like I'm making a lot of assumptions. And that's what's happening now. Mark and I are really assuming that more phone calls is everyone's goal. And while I personally believe that the human voice is powerful for connection, I need to acknowledge something. Phone calls might not be your thing. And you might have other more important friendship goals right now. I've talked about friendship goals before. If you're like, I've never heard those episodes, then you can go back and listen to episode 23, where I share my own friendship goals for 2023. Or you can listen to episode 60, which is where I kind of get into the nitty gritty. We dive into why friendship goals matter and how to actually make them. Spoiler, part of it is just picking a couple to work on at a time. Because here's the thing I want to emphasize right now is that we can't tackle all of our friendship goals at once. Like you might already be listening to this episode. You've listened to a few of my episodes. I don't know, maybe you have a goal to host more things or to say yes to more outings or whatever your goal is. Adding phone calls right now might just not feel like the right fit. And I want to tell you that's okay. I want to reframe it. Think about it this way. You can't just snap your fingers and be good with money or set for retirement, right? When you're working on your finances, you take it step by step. Maybe you set up some accounts one day. Then a few weeks later or a month later, you automate some savings. Down the line, you sit down and you figure out kind of an investment strategy. It's a process, and that's normalized. Well, guess what? Your friendship habits are exactly the same way. Maybe you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, yeah, more phone calls maybe should be a goal of mine right now. Or maybe more phone calls sounds like something you'll tackle in a year or two. Or honestly, maybe it will never be your goal because you just don't like talking on the phone. And that's totally okay. The point is trying to be a maybe good friend, whatever that means to you, isn't something that happens overnight. You can't possibly work on every friendship habit at once. So if you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I have to add phone calls to the list of things, let it go. Focus on whatever else you are focusing on. Like, I love that you're considering phone calls, but it doesn't need to be your friendship goal right now. And if you're sitting here and you're thinking, like, Alex, people set friendship goals? What the heck are they? I'm here to tell you, again, go listen to those two episodes I mentioned, episodes 23 and 60. They're linked in the show notes and they'll help you figure out where to start. You know, I have noticed the messaging tracking capabilities, but your app is called SoonCall. So the goal here, I think, is to get people on the phone, like speaking more.
Yep.
And funny enough, this is actually the second time in the last week I've had like a deep conversation about our telephone habits. So can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think that talking on the phone is, here's what I've noticed. I'm going to tell you what I've noticed. If somebody wants to call me, a lot of them will text me first.
Yes.
And you and I are of an age where we remember when text messages cost a certain amount of money per text message. So you never did that because you just called somebody.
Yep.
And now we have to text everybody. And I'm like, man, I miss the random phone call. I feel like the other thing I've noticed is if I am going to have like a longer call, let's say, you know, a friend and I have like set aside, I don't know, an hour. If anything eats into that hour, I feel like sometimes it's like, oh, let's reschedule. It's like, we could still have 45 minutes. What are we? What?
There's still that time.
Like, just because it's not this like perfect length of time we thought we had, now we want to reschedule it. I just think like phone calls and friendships nowadays are wild. And I think it's generational. Every generation is different. You and I are kind of in a middle space. But what are some things you've noticed, I guess, about the calling crisis? Like,
It's a really interesting point of conversation because people are really divided about this. I notice some people just do not want anything to do with the phone calls. Other people really enjoy phone calls, but they really struggle with the spontaneous phone call, right? I don't know how much of this is to do with the fact that now we have kind of video calls prevalent in the workplace, and whether that's kind of come about to change the way we feel about things. Obviously, like you say, in the past, it used to be that sending somebody a message beforehand wouldn't have made any sense because the message cost. I think we feel like we're disturbing people.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm talking a bit there from my own experience of struggling sometimes to just call someone spontaneously, but I do it to other people. I never text my mum before calling her. I would call her at any hour of the day without worrying about that. And I have a few friends like that as well. But more often than not, you block yourself into thinking that you're going to really bother them. And I think maybe the question to ask is how you feel about it yourself, if somebody did it back to you as well.
Well, that's the thing is I love an unprompted call. Like I love a call in the middle of something. And when I answer those calls, the person on the other end is generally like, oh, I didn't think you'd answer. And I'm like, oh no, I saw your name and I am excited. But yet
Exactly.
when I want to call someone else, I'm like, oh, I don't know. It could be like school pickup time. This is like their commute time. So maybe it's a good time, but maybe they're busy. I don't know. And I go back and forth.
Yep.
I'm like outing myself here. I'm not that great at initiating the unprompted call, but I love them.
Yeah. I feel very, very similar myself, to be honest. I mean, I think there's an element as well of, I'm sure we'll get onto this, so I don't want to jump about too much, but when it comes to scheduling a call, I think that can have its own pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
There can be this element of kind of pre-call nerves, even if it's somebody you're really close with. And I think that the nice thing about a spontaneous phone call is you decide in that moment, I'm available or I'm actually really busy, you know, I genuinely can't answer the phone right now, or actually, yeah, I was kind of doing something, but yeah, sure, I'll see what's going on. And it kind of alleviates some of that kind of build up that you might have before calling someone. Like, oh, I've penciled this in. It has to be at this certain time, like you say, it has to fill this hour, or I've eaten into the hour, it can't happen anymore. Spontaneous phone calls are great. And I think we should be having more conversations with our friends about how they feel about it, because I've noticed that people I thought I might bother, nearly all of them have told me that they also really enjoy getting a spontaneous call and they would love it if I called them spontaneously.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing then is that we probably just need to all have a more open conversation with our friends about how they feel about spontaneous phone calls.
Yeah, I would say so.
Something else I've noticed, and I'm just going to say this for anyone, is for the people where like, for example, my friends who are moms, a lot of times I'll be like, well, I don't know, are they doing drop off, whatever, this, that. And I will want to call them, but, you know, push it another day and another day and another day because in my head, I'm like, well, I don't know what their schedule is. And what I've started doing is regularly asking what their schedule is, to be quite honest. It's just like, hey, is there a good time during the day generally for me to call you? And I've had friends who are like, yeah, I'm in the car from 3:30 to 4:30 for school pickup. And the first 30 minutes of that, I'm generally alone. But if you call me the second 30 minutes, you're getting all three of us, which I actually love too, because then I have like little kiddos in the back screaming like, TT, my day was da 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 da, you know, because I want to talk to them too. And that's great. So for me, sometimes it's like just asking about the timing.
Yep.
Just a direct question can alleviate sometimes, if I'm being honest, like months I have spent trying to assume what times would be good and then holding myself back.
That's probably one of the best starting points, right? Is to have a conversation about how people feel about spontaneous calls and have a conversation about maybe what, you know, if they're particularly busy, what kind of times work for them. I think just having that open communication. Then I suppose if you call someone spontaneously, I mean, we're worried about disturbing them, but if they are really busy, they're not going to answer. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that can still sometimes feel not great.
No, that's a great reminder. I was just like, I mean, what's the harm?
Exactly.
They didn't answer.
Exactly.
Like, okay, move on.
Yep.
Honestly, that's probably the soundbite of this whole thing. It's just a reminder that, like, we're not being chased by a cheetah and like
Exactly.
gonna trip and be eaten,
Yep.
which is what our body might tell us or our brain might tell us. Oh, well, that's a reminder. I mean, we are obviously pro spontaneous phone call, it seems. But I am curious, do you have any friends or people where you have kind of like a regularly scheduled recurring call?
Yes, I do. Because I mean, as you say, I am quite pro spontaneous call, but I know that doesn't work for everybody. And I also, it's nice to mix it up myself as well sometimes.
Yeah.
I have some friends that we don't have a fixed schedule. When it's time to catch up, we'll pick a day that week and a time, and then we schedule it in. And then I have another friend who actually at the end of the phone call, we agree there and then when we're going to talk next. And he puts it in his calendar, myself as well, so that I don't forget as well. Well, I put it in the SoonCall myself. And then that's a great way of looking forward to it. I have friends with different routines. So some I will schedule ahead of time, and sometimes we'll say, okay, it's been a while, and then we'll pick a day in that week, maybe in the next few days.
I mean, just because you have a recurring call with someone doesn't mean you can't also spontaneously call them. Just throwing that out there.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's a mix, right? And I think whenever it gets you to call the person
Exactly.
and stay in contact with the person that you care about, the better.
Yeah.
Like whatever works at the end of the day. I also have some people that I have recurring. I don't know if I call it calls. I have some people where it's like one way or another, we try and get together, like every week, every other week, every whatever. And sometimes that's a call, and sometimes they live close enough that we can go on a walk. Sometimes that's a reminder that this week is just like way too busy, but we're going to, voice message back and forth a couple times for 5 minutes. And like, that's this week. We're kind of like skipping, and then next week. But you said something, it stood out to me when you were talking, kind of this idea of like when it's been too long.
Yeah.
Do you have an amount of time that is like too long for you?
Again, I think it's very personal to the friendships. And I think going back to earlier where you said, talking specifically about SoonCall, the data in the app is for you. It's not for anybody else. I think that's an important thing because every friendship's different, and you should allow yourself the ability to kind of decide personally how often you want to catch up with different friendships. Some friends you're going to want to talk to maybe every week, every 2 weeks. Others, I have friends that I may not talk to for 6 months, which sounds like a long time, but just being able to check in 6 months and then everything's as it was 6 months ago, 6 months prior, we just pick up where we left off. That's great because I understand that that's how our friendship is. And if we get to meet up in person, even better. It's really like we will last together. So I would say that I generally don't like to leave it more than 3 to 6 months. It really depends on the friends, though. Yeah.
Yeah. And the joy of your app is that the number's there. And probably at the end of the day, there's something of just kind of like your gut, right? You see the number and you're like, oh, that's been a while. Like, prioritize that.
Yeah, exactly. It's that reminder, and then you can decide, okay, actually, it's only been X amount of time. I would normally catch up. It would normally wait longer, but I'm dying to speak to that friend. I mean, there's nothing stopping you speaking sooner, right?
No, yeah. Just give him a call.
Exactly, give him a call.
Or shoot them a text. But that brings up, I know you have because you're European, you have WhatsApp in there. I do use WhatsApp, but the Americans don't use WhatsApp quite the same way. And texting, which is still just WhatsApp. It's all the same. But when you're messaging with people, let's talk a little bit about like messaging versus calling, because I don't know about you, like messaging, texting back and forth with someone is just so normalized now. And this thing I keep catching myself doing is I will literally be like back and forth messaging with someone about something that's kind of like a bigger topic. And then I have this moment where I'm like, we are obviously both like, why don't we just call each other? Like, can we just talk about some of the limitations of texting and why you're encouraging calling so much more?
Let's start with the caveat, right? That there is a place for messaging. It has become an important part of our lives. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't message your friends, and this is why we support tracking that as well, right? Because there is a place for it. But I think, as you say, there's that kind of asynchronous communication of this kind of back and forth. And I don't know about you, but when I message friends, sometimes it can span over several days.
Yes.
It's rarely, if I'm lucky, we might have like a 20-minute window where we're talking back and forth. But then one of us becomes busy with something, and then it starts staggering over several days, and it just doesn't feel the same. I know that that's a bit fuzzy to say, but I think that a big part of the benefit of calling is getting that kind of those vocal cues. You can really tell a lot more about what's going on with someone just by hearing their voice, and you feel a lot closer. You feel like it's about as close as you can go to actually being in the room with them, right? And that would be my point of view. I know that then there's the separate topic of video calls, but I think phone calls are great because you've got that emotion involved, but maybe you're not having to sit kind of fixed looking at a camera. You can kind of maybe even still kind of go about and do things, or just sit on the sofa and have the phone there and just let the words flow.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, there's so many things I could say in there. I've been very open on the podcast about how I'm not a very good texter. And it's something I am constantly working on because I do feel like it's a detriment to my friendships. As you were talking, I realized like I think a part of it is that I just want to have the conversation. And you're right, where sometimes we'll be going back and forth, but other times I send a message and then, responses the next day. And then the response is like, I respond 48 hours after that. And like, I just want to have the conversation. And when I am in person with someone, I am so present. Like I won't respond to a single friggin' text message that comes in. So that's the perk, is that part of the reason is because I'm present in whatever I'm doing. So the phone calls, to me, it's like, gosh, if we could just talk for 10 minutes, we could have this conversation that we are about to have over the course of 8 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're right. With the voice, I would probably feel even more connected to you than I do with, these messages back and forth. I love a voice note. I know they're not everyone's thing, but sometimes I will use a voice note as an intermediary, especially in a moment, like when you're talking about how the nuances of your voice and things come through, especially if I'm messaging with someone and we're in a spot where maybe there's some like disagreement, or I feel like whatever I could send could be interpreted the wrong way. I don't even send a text message anymore. Like, I don't care whether they like voice notes or not, they're getting a voice note, because sometimes that's the only way to convey my actual meaning of this message is for them to hear my voice. And I think that in and of itself is kind of like proof of what you're saying, that the nuance is so important.
I think that's a great point. I was a bit late to the voice note game. I mean, previous years I would have probably been on the side of saying that I'm not a big fan of them. But I think the fact that it's so hard to infer meaning sometimes from a message, that's all you really need to say to kind of see the benefit of voice note, or even better, a phone call, right? Is because written form and text is it can be really difficult to interpret meaning, especially if you're an overthinker like myself. I'm terrible for it, absolutely terrible for it. And I think being able to actually just say, okay, I'm going to send a voice note just to really make clear that I'm not angry, I'm not upset, or, I don't mean things in this way. I think, yeah, it's a really good point.
I mean, the other thing I would just point out for anybody, sometimes I'll get caught in a situation where maybe we are voice noting back and forth, like we're both present, or we are video messaging back and forth, not FaceTiming, video messaging. We're both there. And I just want to point out to somebody that well, that is great. The other thing I find is when we are doing that asynchronous, where even though we're there, but we are maybe talking about multiple things back and forth, I find myself thinking if we just had this conversation, the person has told me something.
Yep.
And if we were on the phone, I would be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But because we're not live talking to each other, even though we are both watching at the same time, but because we're not actually on the phone, then the person is maybe the overthinker. And they're like, but don't be upset about that. That doesn't ruin this. That doesn't da-da-da-da-da. It's if we were on the phone, I would just tell them, oh, you don't need to worry about that. But instead, 90 seconds of this voice note is now them explaining something I was never even worried about.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're kind of trying to think ahead before that person actually interprets. Yeah.
Yeah. We're missing that whole piece, people. Yep. I feel like we've made we're really making a case for more phone calls over here. I really hope people do more phone calls after this. Let's talk a little bit about the app itself and how it helps people. I talk a lot about how technology is a great support to our connection, right? SoonCall can't replace actually picking up the phone and calling people. But as we've covered in this episode, there are lots of reasons, lots of friction points why someone may not pick up the phone. And some of it is just on you and me doing the thing. But what are some other ways that SoonCall helps people reduce the friction to actually reach out to their friends?
Probably the first point is going back to this visibility that we've mentioned before, because I think it can be uncomfortable to pick up the phone and call someone. It can also be uncomfortable to be faced with the reality of when you last actually spoke to that person, right? Then the kind of the reminder scheduling. So when you kind of take that active intention of saying, okay, I want to call this friend on this date, then you get that reminder through on that date. That just this notification, just kind of all in one place, in the sense that this is all kind of managed in the SoonCall app. It's not across all of your other different apps. And so you've got something that's just focused just on your friendships. You get that notification to pick up the phone, that kind of gentle encouragement of, okay, you said you want to talk to them then. Then we recently also introduced kind of a similar delayed notification that is completely optional. Gives you that encouragement again, maybe after 1 hour, 2 hours, you can set that yourself to sort of say, how did the call go? Let's track a bit of information about that for yourself to reflect on in the future. And something that we're kind of actively working on as we speak is the ability also to kind of customize those notifications that we're talking about. So let's say you want to catch up with, I'm always using your sister as an example here, but your sister, and the next time you talk to her, maybe you're busy right now, but you know that you're going to call her tomorrow and you want to make sure that you ask her about some flights for a trip or something like this. We're working on also allowing people to kind of input some of that personalized information for that contact, for that friend when the catch-up's due. And yeah, just some of these note-taking features, being able to, obviously some people remember every detail. Some people, like I have several friends that can remember the birthdays even of about 100 different people.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Myself, even just what we spoke about last can be a great way to reduce the friction because, John, last time I was speaking to John, we were talking about how he had to take his dog to the vet. So I should check in and ask him how it's going with that and check everything's okay. So the fact that you can kind of put a bit more context around your friendships, I think can also help you just take that first step of picking up the phone and trying that spontaneous call.
There are, like you're saying, like there's so many features in here that are helpful to people. And I've said this before. I think that a lot of times we like romanticize our friendships. We believe that if we're a good friend, we should just remember that John needs to take his dog to the vet next Wednesday, and that no matter what's happening on our Wednesday, even if our day went totally off the rails, if we were a good friend or they were somebody we were really close to, we would just remember. But that's the joy of this podcast, as we talk about the realities of it. I talk to so many people about friendship, and the people who feel like they are doing and I have air quotes here, like a good job at friendship, most of them have a system. Like I put reminders in my Google Calendar for John having to take his vet on Wednesday.
Yep.
Like if you're out there thinking you're a bad friend, people are not just remembering this. I have a calendar that has every birthday, anniversary, kid's birthday, like they're all in there. And as soon as I hear of a new one, it gets added to the calendar. Like I don't just remember it. So it's just so beautiful that you have put all of this into one place. And I'll just go one more step further. I don't do this, but I do know a lot of people who have like a notes section where they will write things down about friends.
Yeah.
And so now all of that can be in one place for people.
Yeah, absolutely. As you kind of mentioned in your own system, remembering kind of, for example, partners' birthdays, children's birthdays, anniversaries, all of these kind of significant dates. This is something, again, that we're working on at the moment, due to be released soon in a future update, because we've seen how useful just birthdays are. So being able to kind of extend that beyond the birthday of your friend, maybe it's the birthdays of their partners, their children, maybe it's an anniversary or just a recurring date of some other significance that you want to remember.
Yeah. And just having it in one place.
Exactly. Having it in one place to help you kind of build that habit. Yeah, that's what we're all about.
This is something I would normally tell you at the end of the episode in my outro, but I don't want to risk that you will shut this episode off before you get to this part. Because Mark is offering something special just for Friendship IRL listeners. He's offering 6 months of free access to SoonCall Pro. And if you're ready to take some of that friendship mental load off your plate, head to SoonCall.com/Alex to claim your free access. To close out this episode that I think has just been, I don't know, I hope that this episode reminds people, like if they're being hard on themselves, that really it's maybe just that they need a system to support them, and that a lot of people are using a system. And now you don't have to DIY that. You can just download SoonCall and plug in that info, and the system is set up for you and continuing to be updated. But I was going to close out this episode by asking you, now that you've developed this app, you've already mentioned you're using it. How do you think it has like impacted you the most? What's been maybe the biggest change you've seen in yourself?
I think, first of all, I've learned to be nicer to myself about my friendships. That was an interesting conclusion to take away from it. But I think realizing, as you say, that people that are doing really well with this most likely have a system that they've built. So I think getting to see a system in place, getting to use the system that I've built with SoonCall, it's helping me be nicer to myself about the difficulty of maintaining friends. That's the first point. I also think it has helped me just take that first step. And I say first step, but I mean first step really with all my friends, right? Of not worrying about being the person to reach out, because we're all busy. And sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'll just wait for them to reach out because, I'm a bit busy at the moment. So kind of not worrying about being that person, finding it easier to be that person, to just check in. And whether that is actually trying that spontaneous phone call that we mentioned earlier, or just sending a voice note, or even sending a message, just taking an action to move things forward. I think it's really helped with that. Even if it's small baby steps, it's building that kind of habit and helping me realize that this stuff is something that should be worked on, not something that's kind of romanticized idea that I probably used to think it was in my mind. Right now, I'm kind of taking a more practical approach and being more forgiving to myself. The other thing I think that it's helped me with is more on the data side, on the insight side, because we tend to think that we can kind of paint a picture of what's going on with our friendships, right? We tend to think that, okay, especially if you consider a small handful of friends, you think that you've got it all kind of sussed out in your head. But being able to kind of offload some of that kind of calculation and insights to a system that can kind of build up a picture for me of what's going on and help me spot patterns has been really, really helpful. So being able to actually see using data. Actually, I'm always messaging Jane, and I'm never calling Jane. But on the flip side, James, I call them without problems, and sometimes I'm even video calling them. Yeah, so I think the insights has been another great thing.
Well, if we take that back to the finance example that I had earlier, it's like the mental load of it all.
Yeah.
You know, it's sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind, and other times we don't quite have the data to track all of this. And so then it would be like, I guess, if I was trying to track my coffee shop spending and I'm like, well, I don't know, have I gone once a week? Have I gone 3 times a week? I'm like trying to count all that. I'm like, oh, what's my average cost per coffee? That's X amount of money, versus just being able to open, again, like a budgeting app and see, and maybe you have to go in and change a couple categories. But at the end, you're just like, oh, okay, well, that's my total. I've gone X number of weeks, right? We can just analyze that. And that is so normalized. I think maybe that is such a huge takeaway for people in this episode is like, why is it like a little taboo, I guess, to have data on your connections and be able to just pull them up? Like, why do we feel like we have to do all that mental labor? Who said that? Who made that rule? That rule sucks. Why are we doing it to ourselves? That's probably just another reason everybody's struggling so hard. It's like by the time you've done all that math, you're already exhausted. Now you got to push yourself to actually pick up the phone and make the call.
Absolutely.
You've just alleviated a bunch of work, and all that energy could go instead to actually calling the person. And I think most people don't even realize they're doing those mental gymnastics in their heads because we're not talking about it. Well, you're talking about it now.
It can be sneaky. I don't think everybody realizes how much mental effort and mental calculation they're doing around their friendships until you start talking about it and thinking about it.
I mean, I think people are doing a lot without a lot of structure is what I would say. Most people don't spend time thinking, like you were saying earlier, like, right, 3 to 6 months is a little too long. Most people have never even considered how long is too long for their comfort zone, but they do have some sort of number. Like if you look and you realize it's been a year, depending on that friendship and where you fall, you might panic. And I talk a lot about how we get over that panic and just do the thing. But this is maybe a great reminder of like, what if we just got rid of the panic in the first place?
Yeah.
What if you just did the work, spent a little time reflecting on what you think is too long, and then you actually had the app to pull up to know there's no more question mark? How much energy and worry and anxiety would that save people?
Yeah, I think that's really nicely summarized.
Well, lots for people to think about, that's for sure. Thanks, Mark, for putting this app out in the world. I'm really excited to see where it goes, especially as more and more people hear about it.
Thank you. We've got an exciting roadmap. Lots of interesting things to explore and try out in the coming months. And we want that roadmap to be led by people that are using the app. We want to help as many people as we can with this, because I think everybody should have access to a system or a tool that can help them with their friendships.
You know what I love most about my conversation with Mark? It's not just that he created a solution to help us stay in touch. It's that he normalized something we've all been feeling guilty about, whether we knew it or admitted it. And it's that mental load of trying to remember when we last called someone, wondering if it's been too long, calculating if it's a good time to reach out. We're all doing these friendship gymnastics in our heads, and maybe we don't have to. The reality is, being a good friend doesn't mean remembering everything without help. It doesn't mean always getting it perfect. Sometimes it just means having systems that support us in showing up consistently for the people we care about. So whether you're someone who loves a spontaneous call or you're more comfortable with scheduled catch-ups, SoonCall might be exactly what you need to take some of the mental load off. The app helps you track your connections, reminds you when it's time to reach out, and even lets you keep notes about what's happening in your friends' lives, all in one place. Now, here's something exciting. Mark has created a special offer just for Friendship IRL listeners. You can get 6 months of free access to SoonCall Pro by visiting SoonCall.com/Alex. Think about it. In those 6 months, how many meaningful conversations could you have? How many connections could you strengthen? How many "I've been meaning to call you" moments could you turn into actual calls? Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. And sometimes being intentional just means having the right tools to help us follow through on our good intentions. Until next week, keep being brave enough to create meaningful connections, even if that means using an app to help you do it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle @itsAlexAlexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting, and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.